consequences of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I know we've often heard the administration refer to Putin's price hike. I just got back actually last week. I was out in Michigan talking to a lot of voters who told me that they feel like inflation has predated the war. And I'm curious how the administration just, squares this all together. I mean, many voters do feel that inflation, and correctly so, predates the war, and it can't all be blamed on Vladimir Putin.
We talked about inflation long before there was an invasion, but we also know that factually, if you look at the data, the average gas prices are up $1.80 to $1. It's about a 25%. We've seen increase in gas prices since the start of this invasion, and we know energy prices is a big driver of the inflation data. So that's if you look at the economic data. It doesn't mean, I'm not suggesting every person in this country looks at data and assesses in that way. They assess how they feel and what the impacts are on them. We've long talked about, since at least I started this job, since the president came into office, the impacts of the pandemic on supply chains, how that's impacted a range of costs, and steps we're taking to address those, whether it's ensuring there's our goods moving through ports, or other steps we can take to ensure there are, we fund chips manufacturing, because autos and the production of autos, maybe this was a case or an issue when you were in Michigan, has definitely been a driver over the course of time. So there's a lot of different issues, but there's no question that energy prices continue to be month by month a driver of inflationary data. And we know that since the start of this invasion, because of the reduction of oil in the supply in the global oil market, from Putin's invasion, that is a big driver. Go ahead.
Jen, thanks so much. Just circling back to Kelly's question about the new ATF nominee. Can you describe any outreach that's been done to the Senate to ensure that the confirmation process goes more smoothly than it did to the last selection?
Well, because we're just announcing him today, I would expect it would be from here forward, right? Obviously, there are notifications that happen in advance of any announcement, but certainly we feel that he is somebody who has been supported from had bipartisan support in the past, is broadly supported by a number of police groups, and that he's an excellent candidate to lead ATF. But I wouldn't validate a process going awry. I think it's more about whether or not Republicans in Congress feel that there should be a head of the ATF, and we believe there should be, and this is a person who is eminently qualified to do that.
Did that notification process include Senator Manchin's office?
I'm not going to get into specifics of the notification process, but obviously since he's just making this announcement today, I would expect that the outreach picks up from here.
Okay. And then just on the president was photographed over the weekend in Washington, D.C. wearing a mask. I just wanted to, if you could go through like when he masks and when he doesn't. Would it appear that he did not have a close contact, but correct me if that's wrong?
He did not, but we all make decisions. Some people in here are wearing masks to make them more comfortable, or because they chose to that day, or maybe they're going to be around family members or people who may be immunocompromised or vulnerable, and the president makes that decision, as we all do as well.
Jen, could I just ask a kind of a broader question related to the Modi meeting?
Sure.
You've talked a lot about the president's leadership in terms of assembling a global coalition against Russia, but that global coalition isn't really global in the sense that there are many countries out there, India is one of them, that hasn't really joined, hasn't really taken a side. They've sort of adopted a neutral stance, as Caitlin mentioned, the votes in the UN, including the most recent one on kicking Russia out of the UN Human Rights Council. So, do you all consider India an example of a kind of failure to broaden the coalition to countries like India beyond the sort of core European countries? And if so, was this call used, or does the president see pressure to use a call like this to expand that global coalition even further, so that Russia doesn't have the kind of lifelines that it needs to escape the sanctions and the like?
Well, I would say building more than 50%, far more than 50% of the world's GDP into a global coalition is hardly a failure. I don't think anyone would call that a failure. But what India has done to date, and our objective, and part of the objective of a phone call like this, is to have a diplomatic conversation to build on this, right? Recognizing that countries go at different paces and taking steps to support countries like Ukraine. What what India has done to date is they have condemned the killings of civilians in Bucha. They've supported calls for an independent investigation. They've provided over 90 tons of humanitarian relief material to Ukraine and its neighbors, to include medicine and other essential relief. Earlier in the conflict, they also used its resources to evacuate almost 150 foreign nationals for 18 different countries. So part of our objectives now is to build on that and to encourage them to do more. And that's why it's important to have leader-to-leader conversations.
Jen?
Go ahead.
The mask mandate for public transportation like trains, buses, and airplanes expires next week. Does the White House or the administration have any plans on extending that?
Well, it's a decision made by the CDC, so they will make that decision, and I'm not aware of a decision being made at this point, but I would certainly point you to them.
Jen.
Go ahead.
I'd like to switch gears here. Do you have an update on Brittany Griner? Russian state media reporting that her detention's been extended at least until May 19th. And also, is it still a strategy not to talk about her case or limit talk about her case to keep from politicizing it?
So the State Department will have the most up-to-date information. I think it's been out for some time, the extension of her detention there. We typically don't talk about cases in advance of having a Privacy Act waiver. Once we had a Privacy Act waiver, we can talk about it more. But historically, and having formerly served at the State Department, it is not typically constructive to talk a great deal about these cases of individuals who are detained. It can historically impact our ability to bring them home, and that, of course, is our objective. But the State Department makes those determinations. They are in closest touch with efforts to bring her home, and that certainly is our objective.
I have to ask Trevor Reed or Paul Whelan.
Again, these are, of course, individuals, and we want to do everything we can, and we are doing everything we can to bring them home, including raising their cases at every opportunity. But typically, it does not benefit the cases to talk publicly about these cases, and I would use evidence of some individuals we've been able to bring home from a variety of places in the last several months where we didn't talk a lot about them in advance. Our goal is to bring them home. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. On the president's conversation with Modi, wondering if the fact that Mayor Garcetti doesn't appear to have the votes for confirmation right now, is there any concern around that, especially given how much the U.S. wants to press India not to cooperate with Russia? Was that, the question of his confirmation discussed, and does
I'm not aware of it being a topic during the call.
Does the president still support his nomination?
Yep, he does.
And then, is there any reaction on the French election and the outcome with Le Pen? And
Well, there's not an outcome yet. It goes to a runoff. So obviously at this point, we're not going to speak to that. Go ahead.
Thank you. During the call, Prime Minister Modi thanked President Biden for organizing this call. Can you give us a broader context into it, why this call was organized by President Biden and at this particular time?
Sure. Well, I would say India is an incredibly important partner. We consult very closely with India on a range of issues. And this was an opportunity to discuss, work very closely and discuss the consequences of Russia's unprovoked and unjustified war against Ukraine. This builds on discussions that have happened, obviously at a lower level than Prime Minister Modi and President Biden, but certainly is a reflection of the value the president sees in leader-to-leader diplomacy and having conversations that are candid, that are direct, but also provide, hopefully, a pathway to continuing to build on the steps we've seen India take in recent weeks.
Given the situation that in neighboring Pakistan, what is your assessment of the situation there, given that it's a nuclear power country, the situation is quite volatile?
In terms of the new leadership, or what aspect?
The security aspect of Pakistan.
I don't have a new assessment from here to offer. I would point you to the Defense Department. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Several Parkland parents, including Manuel Oliver, who was taken into police custody at the White House in February while attempting to get the president's attention, will be attending today's Rose Garden event. Does President Biden have any plans to meet with Oliver or any of the other Parkland parents at the gun violence prevention event?
I will check. I don't believe there are additional meetings, but obviously inviting these incredibly courageous parents who have experienced the worst thing that can happen to a parent in their lives is a reflection of his respect and all of our respect for the work they've done, their advocacy, and certainly an acknowledgement of that.
Yesterday, on a separate topic, Larry Summers warned that a recession could be on the way in the next 2 years based on the inflation and unemployment rates. Is the White House also concerned that a recession could hit in the next 2 years? And what do you make of his prescription of tariff reduction, strategic petroleum reserve release, adjusting immigration flows, and the federal government purchasing things more inexpensively?
Well, I would say a number of those things we're already doing, but I would say to your earlier question, we, of course, continue to assess the state of our economy, the health of our economy. That's not a projection we have made from here. We believe that the economy is strong. We have created more jobs last year than any year in American history. We saw the unemployment rate at 3.6% last month. And we know that as we're continuing through an economic recovery, that there are areas that we need to focus on, including bringing down costs for the American people. But we are continuing to assess. We've not made that projection from U.S. government economists that Larry Summers has made. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. On the guns, Biden's approval rating on crime is at 34% for some of the latest polling. That's at the same time as you know that background checks have a lot of approval from the American public, as well as there's 63% that have supported the ghost gun regulation that you guys are finalizing today. What's causing the disconnect there? Is there any plan to change the White House's messaging moving forward from the events today?
Well, I would first say that there's nothing the president would love more than signing background check legislation into law. That's something he has been a leader, a champion, an advocate for throughout his career, and also banning assault weapons. He'd love to be having an event in the Rose Garden today, signing legislation into law. And you're right, it's hugely popular. It doesn't make a lot of sense except for the hold the NRA still seems to have over components of government at this point in time. Not our government, but people who are elected. So I wouldn't say our messaging has changed. I think it's important, and that's always been the case, but ghost guns, we know, are an area where we can take steps to help through executive authority and through executive actions, as the president is doing today, to put in place background checks, to put in place a requirement of serial numbers, to bring them more in line with a range of other guns. But we'd love to get broad background check legislation signed.
To ask you, do you have any response to the news that Jared Kushner secured a $2 million investment from a fund led by Saudi Crown Prince, led by the Saudi Crown Prince?
I don't have any comment from here, but maybe they'll have a comment. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Going back to the Ukrainian-Russian war, Austrian Chancellor Karl Nehammer is meeting with Putin in Moscow. What does the administration have to say about that? What does the president think that will achieve?
Well, I think we've encouraged or supported any efforts at diplomacy. We've, though, encouraged anyone who is speaking with or meeting with, however they're engaging, with President Putin to also engage with Ukrainians. They are the country that is being invaded right now. And so if you're going to play a role in diplomacy, that is an especially important component. I would expect at some point some will get a readout of their conversation, so I can't predict if it's constructive or not.
And a follow-up on Pakistan, if you will. The new Prime Minister, Sharif, what arrangements does the administration have to contact him, and what's moving forward on that?
You mean whether there will be a call from the president? I don't have... Oh, good.
What expectations are there for his new administration, too?
I don't have a prediction of a call at this point in time. I mean, obviously, those are assessments made day by day, and especially after new leaders are elected, of course. We have a long, strong, and abiding relationship with Pakistan, an important security relationship, and that will continue under new leaders. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Jen. So you said that 2% of the oil coming from Russia is imported into India.
1 to 2.
1 to 2. That's about 16 million barrels. So far, according to contracts, India has imported 13 million barrels since the war began, or since the invasion began of Ukraine. Why not just come out and ask them to help isolate the Russian president?
I think the president conveying, our Deputy National Security Advisor conveying, they should take steps. We encourage them to take steps to diversify. We're here to help and assist in that, and also conveying it's not in their interest to increase the import of Russian oil. I think that speaks for itself, but we also know different countries are going to make decisions based on what their needs are economically and what the needs are for the people in their country. We have, of course, banned the import of oil here. Other countries have not done that, so it's not a violation of any sanctions or any requirement or request from our end.
On inflation, Odessa, so you're saying that because of the president's work, then we will see in the core inflation without gas and food. you'll see that core come down, and you'll see the results of his work in that inflation number?
I was making a prediction not of that, but of the fact that you're going to see, because of the increase in the price of oil, you're going to see an increase in the overarching headline number.
But the core inflation, you're saying that the president...
The core inflation, as you know, because you cover this very closely, does impact a range of factors that we're still working to address. So, but I was making a prediction about the headline component. Okay, thanks everyone. See you tomorrow. Or only if you're going to Iowa, I guess. But for those, yes, wouldn't miss it.
Podcast.